Good afternoon. The weather has turned chillier here in western New York. Autumn has arrived. Please pray for all of the people in Florida and other states affected by the recent hurricanes. We'll be sending a special gift to Samaritan's Purse to help with the assistance efforts, and you can help. In our one-year chronological Bible reading plan, we're continuing our journey through the four Gospels. Today we're highlighting the Gospel of Mark. It's the shortest gospel and the most fast-paced. Mark continually uses the phrase, and immediately Jesus did this, and immediately Jesus went here. And Mark was perhaps the first of the four gospels to be written down. It's attributed to one of Jesus' disciples named Mark, who collected eyewitness accounts, especially from Peter. The very beginning of it says, the beginning of the good news about Jesus the Messiah, the Son of God. There's really three acts in Mark. The first section happens while Jesus is in the region of Galilee. The second act happens as they're on their way to Jerusalem. And then the third act is what happened in Jerusalem. And the continual question that seems to be at the surface of the gospel is, who is Jesus? What does it mean for Jesus to be the Messiah? It's the story of how Jesus becomes king. In the last book of the Old Testament, the prophet Malachi, God spoke of my messenger who will prepare the way for the Lord. Mark's gospel begins with John the Baptist preparing the way for the Messiah. Jesus was baptized by John, and the heavens were opened, and a voice said, "You are my beloved Son." Jesus' message from then on was, God's kingdom has come near. Jesus ushered in God's kingdom in various ways by healing, casting out demons, teaching people, welcoming the least and the lost. And he got varied responses. Some believed and followed, some doubted and scoffed, and some plotted to kill him. Jesus told parables about the mystery of God's kingdom. But even Jesus' followers didn't seem to understand. They kept wondering, who is this? What does his parables mean? What do his parables mean? Jesus is the Messiah, but not the kind that people expected. He didn't come as a glorious military hero who led the people to victory over their enemies and established Israel as the greatest nation in the world. He came to accomplish God's purposes in Jerusalem by suffering, dying, and being raised. This week in our readings, we heard Jesus ask his disciples, "Who do you say that I am?" It's the central question of Mark's gospel. On the way to Jerusalem, Jesus had three conversations with his disciples about what being Messiah would mean for him. Suffering and dying at the hands of the religious leaders, and then rising again. Jesus came not to be served, but to be a servant and to give his life as a ransom for many. We also heard the story of the Transfiguration, where Jesus took Peter, James, and John up a mountain, and there Jesus shone like the sun. He was talking with Moses and Elijah, and then God's glory came down in a bright cloud, like on Mount Sinai. And a voice again said, "This is my beloved Son. Listen to him." But Jesus, the glorious Son of God, came to suffer and die for his people. The last section is how Jesus became king. He was welcomed by the people into Jerusalem like a king and showed his authority over the temple by chasing out the money changers and the sellers of sacrificial animals. He confronted Israel's leaders over their hypocrisy. He predicted Jerusalem's destruction, which happened in 70 AD when the Romans put down a Jewish rebellion. On Maundy Thursday, the Passover night, Jesus met with his disciples to celebrate the Passover meal. They remembered how thousands of years before, God had rescued his people from slavery and death in Egypt and brought them through the Red Sea, through the wilderness, into the promised land. And that night, Jesus took the bread and the wine that they use in that meal and said, "This is my body. This is my blood given and shed for you for the forgiveness of sins." Shortly afterward, he was arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane, tortured, put on through a sham of a trial, and then crucified. And when Jesus died on the cross, darkness came down from above, but there was no voice. There was only the voice of a Roman centurion who said, when he saw Jesus die, "This man was the Son of God." Now, this is one of those places where I wish we had a voice tone Bible so we could really understand how that phrase was said. Did he say it like, "This man was the Son of God"? Or did he mean it as, "This man was the Son of God"? Was he filled with faith, or was he mocking like all the rest of the people around Jesus? The women went to Jesus' tomb on the third day and found the stone rolled away from the tomb and an angel who said, "You're looking for Jesus. He isn't here. He is risen from the dead and will meet you in Galilee. He's going ahead of you." But the women fled in terror and told no one, for they were afraid. The end. That's how the original ending of Mark happens, with the women fleeing in terror and telling no one. And as we read that, we think, what? We know there's more to the story. In fact, there's a whole nother ending of the rest of chapter 16 that was added later. It's not in the earliest and most reliable manuscripts of Mark that we have. So perhaps the abrupt ending was intentional. It was this shocking claim that Jesus is alive and is going ahead of us. The whole Gospel of Mark asks, what will you do with Jesus? Will you run away, or will you acknowledge him as Lord and King? In the description of this post, I'll give you a link to a guide to Mark from the Bible Project. They point out that the turning point in the Gospel of Mark is chapter 8, where Jesus asked his disciples and us, "Who do you say that I am?" The Bible Project notes that Jesus was not the king the people were expecting. Mark's account doesn't shy away from the unexpected nature of Jesus' arrival on earth, but he also makes clear that Jesus is who he says he is, the Jewish Messiah and the Son of God. Many of the Jewish people hoped that the Messiah would come to overthrow the Romans and rule as king, but that isn't what Jesus did. He came to serve and to usher in God's kingdom on earth. And he didn't come in royal authority and power. He came to humbly sacrifice his life in order to save his people. Who is Jesus? The Gospel of Mark is a carefully crafted story that asks us as readers, is Jesus the Jewish Messiah? Mark includes specific details and story to show Jesus' messianic authority and identity as God's Son. He's making a case for who Jesus is, and he leaves the answer up to the reader to ponder. What will you choose to believe? This Saturday, our 6th through 9th graders will have their Fall Fest here at St. Peter's from 11 to 3 with youth from St. James as well. We'll have lunch, games, a hayride, pumpkin decorating, a faith challenge, and make your own caramel apples. Hope to see you in worship this weekend at 8:30 or 11. Sunday school and adult class are at 9:45. This week in our adult class, Martha Hasley will share her spiritual family tree. Have a great end of the week.